everybody. Welcome to the Talking Disney Classics podcast, and the show where we like to talk about the Disney canon and our favorites. And we like to have guests on to share with us their rankings. It's a lot of fun. And I am film critic Rachel Wagner, and Stanford is here.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. And today we have special guest, our first time having a director or animator with us on the podcast to share their rankings. We have director Steven Anderson with us. And thank you so much, Steven, for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, Stanford. Great to be here. Very excited.
We're excited too.
We both interviewed you in the past. And so I'll put links down to those interviews. But for the record, for people that are new, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little about how you got started as an animator and director.
Let's see, I always wanted to be in animation, particularly at Disney. I went to school at the California Institute of the Arts out here in Valencia, California, studied animation there, and then worked in the industry for a couple years at a studio called Hyperion Animation, doing a bunch of different things. And then in 1995, I joined Walt Disney Feature Animation, and my first film there was Tarzan. I was a story artist on Tarzan. Then I was the story supervisor on Emperor's New Groove and Brother Bear. Then director of Meet the Robinsons and 2011's Winnie the Pooh. Then went over to TV animation to work on Monsters at Work for Disney Plus, supervising director on that. And then left Disney in 2021 just to find some new adventures. Needed a change, and so I've been working on a bunch of different things, hopefully many of which will be coming out soon.
So did you go to school for animation?
Yeah, at CalArts, they have an animation program in their film school, and it continues to this day to be one of the top schools in the country, and I think in the world, for animation, to study animation, mainly because while Disney does not own the school, Disney does have a fair amount of sponsorship of the school. In fact, Walt Disney himself founded the school before he passed away, and then Roy Disney, his brother, finished it after he had a few years after he passed away. They finally opened it. Roy opened CalArts. So they have that connection to both the industry and to Disney. So you get really great, firsthand industry involvement in terms of the faculty that's there. So,
did you just lose your mind when you got in? When you got that acceptance letter? Yeah.
Oh, I did, because so we're talking about 1980. Let's see. I graduated high school in 88. So I must have applied in either 86 or 87. I had no clue how I was going to get into animation. That's what I wanted to do, but I had no idea what the path was to get there. Trying to figure out, I'm going to go to college. What am I going to study? My dad didn't really want me to do an art major because that's so kind of flaky, at least at the time it was, or he felt it was. So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then one day I got the latest issue of Disney News magazine. If you're familiar with this magazine, they used to.
Yes, absolutely.
Part of the Magic Kingdom Club from the old days. And there, lo and behold, there's this article about this place called CalArts, and there's all these pictures of these young students animating, and like I couldn't believe there is a school for animation, and it's affiliated with Disney. So yes, losing my mind is an appropriate way to describe that moment. And I was like, well, that's where I'm going to go, and I'll apply as many times as I need to get in there. And very fortunate to get in there.
So did they give you like internship opportunities and things like that, so you could kind of get that first foothold into the studio?
CalArts didn't. My first job was
at Hyperion.
At Hyperion, on a weird movie called Rover Dangerfield. I was an animating assistant.
I've seen that. Yes.
Classic. That's on my top 10 list for today. No, not really. And that was just, through the show. They have a student showcase at the end of every year. and industry people come to look at the films, and kind of networking, and students can network. And it was kind of through that I found out about Rover Dangerfield and applied and got in. So that's another great thing about CalArts, with having such a close proximity to Disney and the industry as a whole, is that you really do have those chances to network with professionals and make connections like that.
That's so cool. That's
Yeah.
great. I love that.
Yeah.
So what was that like working on Tarzan? That, I mean, especially not only just to work on your first Disney film, but to work on one with the deep canvas and everything
Mhm.
going on with that one. That must have been overwhelming.
It was, yeah, it was overwhelming in many aspects, because it was the fact that I was just there. Number
Yeah.
one was like, wow, I'm here. Number two, super intimidated being there. With just when you do your storyboards and you hang them up on the wall next to all these amazing other storyboard artists that have been doing this for years, and are at this level that you only hope you can attain someday. It was just super intimidating, but an amazing experience. It had its challenges. I was on the movie for about 3 years as the story artist. It took a long time to crack that story, and there were quite a few iterations. I mean, there's always multiple iterations to these movies, but that one really went through a lot. So lots of challenges to it, but so proud of it. That being my first film at Disney, like that's I'm really proud that was my inaugural feature.
Yeah. Well, yeah, a good one to get started on, that's for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah.
So when you got offered the directing job for Meet the Robinsons, that was such a transitional time for the
Mm.
studio, after Chicken Little, and it's just the start of Laster and Cadmo. And so what was, I mean, how did you end up getting that gig, and what was that all like? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, no, it is a weird time. It was a super weird time, and like I said, very, very transitional, and a bit confusing, because the studio was going through big changes. 2D was sort of on its way out. CG was on its way in. Trying to keep both of those things afloat, but then of course it just didn't happen, and 2D went away for quite a few years. So for me, I had just finished working on Brother Bear. I had moved out to the Florida studio because all of that whole film was, with the exception of a few people out here in LA, pretty much 95% made in Florida. So as the story supervisor, I relocated out there for about year and a half, I think. And during that time, I had expressed interest to the studio about in directing someday. I just said, please keep me in mind. That's something I'd really love to do someday. So there were a few little projects that they tossed my way to just kind of, for me to sort of look at and kind of give thoughts on, and develop, just to see how I would do in that situation. And then as Brother Bear wrapped, I moved back here to LA, and then, wanted to kind of continue on that development path, potentially to direct. And the head of development at the time, her name was Pam Coates. She called me into her office and said, "We have this script here." And it was for this property, A Day with Wilbur Robinson, based on this book by William Joyce. And she said, "Read it and see if it's something you might want to develop and then direct at some point." And it was an immediate yes for me, because I was adopted, so I had this personal connection to this kid in the script. I didn't add the adoption stuff to the script. That was done completely apart from me. The studio had no clue that was part of my story. And so I said, "Yeah, I gotta do this. Whatever happens with it, I have to be a part of this." And then we were off and running. Had a big regime change in there about 2-3 years into the production processes, when John Lasseter came in. So that was a big challenge.
Well, as a fellow insomniac, I certainly related to
Yeah.
I thought it was a surprise. I thought it was an effective villain origin story
Oh, good.
surprise. Yeah, I did.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
I did
fun to
too.
kind of create
Yeah.
that as we went. It was very much a yes and kind of development process, production process too. Like
Mm-hmm.
we had we had we had to get started. We didn't have a ton of time. We didn't have a ton of money. And it was like, okay, let's just do something. Let's just do it. Somebody come up
Yeah.
with an idea. That's cool. Let's run with that. And so things really evolved in that way. And that's kind of how Bowler Hat Guy evolved as well.
Nice. How did you get the idea to tie it all back to the "we're moving forward" Disney quote that you had at
Well,
the end?
it's funny because we had Keep Moving Forward in the film long before I had seen that quote. Yeah, I had probably seen it once upon a time, but I just didn't remember it and I didn't connect it to Keep Moving Forward. And then, partway through the process of making the movie, I was reading something and I came across that quote and I was like, oh my gosh, Walt Disney actually said those 3 words.
Mm-hmm.
And so I Xeroxed it, I blew it up on the Xerox machine and hung it up on our bulletin board in our production pod and was like, look at this, can you believe it? And then it was actually Don Hahn at the time who saw it and said, you should put that at the end of the movie because that's really pretty powerful. And so that's kind of how we did that. It was completely by accident, not did not set out to be making a tribute to Walt with that theme, but ended up doing so, after the fact. So
Yeah.
it was pretty neat.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk real quick about Winnie the Pooh.
Hmm.
So that must have been very daunting to tell a story about such an iconic character with such iconic, Sherman Brothers songs.
Mhm.
And I mean, I know there's been a lot of Winnie the Pooh movies and TV shows and stuff over the years, but to make an actual theatrical canon film and to go back to 2D animation, all of that must have been pretty daunting.
It was, and the real challenge was wanting to stay true to all of the origins of not just the Disney origins of Pooh, but also the A.A. Milne and Ernest Shepard illustrations, all of that heritage as well, but not make it feel like it's an old movie.
Yeah.
How do you be true to all of those things, but still make it something that audiences of today can enjoy, and it not feeling too precious or too dusty. So that was definitely a challenge. That was constantly the balance we were going through throughout the film, like when to be nostalgic and when can we kind of push the envelope a little bit and change up things a little bit just so that it's kind of freshen things up a bit. And that was definitely a challenge.
Was it hard with the voice casting because people have such a defined idea of what these characters sound like, and so you have to recast with a lot of them? Was that hard?
Well, from a creative standpoint, it made the process much more fun, and I'm putting this word in quotes, easy, because nothing's easy.
Right.
But all the movies of Disney feature animation start basically with a blank slate, and you have to create a whole world and create a bunch of characters and do it all from scratch. What was unprecedented, for at least my experience and my co-director Don Hall's experience at Disney Features, is that for the first time we're actually starting with a world that exists. We know what it looks like, we know what it feels like, we know what the cast of characters is, we know how they speak, we know how they interact with each other. We can just start working. We don't have to spend all of that time banging your head against the wall going, what is this? So in a lot of ways, it made it easier for us to just start developing ideas because we knew how they spoke and we knew how they interacted. Now, having said that, we did want to see if we could find a few places to switch up the casting to kind of help with the comedy a little bit more. And the 2 characters that we centered around were Owl and Rabbit, where we thought they're really fun characters, but could we get more entertainment out of them? Could we squeeze more of that neuroses out of Rabbit and more of that, pompous ego out of Owl? So we did end up recasting those. We got Tom Kenny, voice of SpongeBob, to be Rabbit, and then we got Craig Ferguson to be Owl, and really let them loose and let them push and push and push. Just to sharpen those characters a bit.
Yeah, very good. So there have been some people who've said, oh, Disney released it the weekend of Harry Potter. It was a big conspiracy to get rid of 2D animation and be the end of 2D animation. What do you think about that?
We were not happy with the decision.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Whatever the motivation was behind it, which we never found. I mean, I have no idea what the motivation was. Maybe it was to kill 2D. Maybe it was loss of faith in this whole initiative to bring Winnie the Pooh back. I have no idea. Mm-hmm. But I know when myself and Don Hall and our producer, Peter Delvecchio, were called across the street to the studio lot and were told that information, we walked back across the street to the animation building, shaking our heads and kind of feeling very defeated, because we thought, why are they doing this? It was originally supposed to be a spring release, and it was a spring release in Europe. They kept it that way. But why are they moving us to the thick of the summer? Their reasons were because, they're two different audiences. Winnie the Pooh and Harry Potter are two totally different audiences. Well, that may be, but more people are going to go see Harry Potter. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, it's like parents only can go to one movie, and so they're going to take unless they only have little kids, I guess,
but even that, it's not to be judgmental, but even that, like, I see little kids in all kinds of movies that I would think,
that's true.
Why are you bringing little kids to that
movie?
Regardless of how dark Harry Potter got, as the movies went on.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know how many parents are, well, again, I don't mean to sound negative or judgmental, but like, I don't know how much that makes a difference these days.
Yeah. I've seen lots of kids going into Fast X, and I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
It's pretty violent.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know why, I don't know what the reasons were, but it was definitely kind of disheartening for us.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. But we enjoyed it. Everything.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Yes.
Yes.
And yes.
Are you a fan of Rachel's Reviews? Do you look forward to Family Movie Night, Female Film Critics Panels, or the Talking Disney podcast? If so, please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a Patreon. As a patron, you get to access monthly events such as the watch-alongs and Q&As, where you get to talk to stars and find out the behind the scenes of the movie making industry. And you can pick what I review for Family Movie Night, or even become a guest on the podcast. Podcasts and YouTube channels are expensive, and I really, really could use your help. I would so appreciate it. You also get to be a member of the Facebook group where we talk about all the films that we're seeing, and we have so much fun. Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies and select one of the Rachel's fan tiers. That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies. Let's get to your top 12 list. And so you didn't include any of your films in this list.
No.
I should start by saying that.
Not because I don't like them, just because that would be, I don't know, that seems weird to me. That seems
I get that. But was there any kind of mythology that what were you thinking as far as coming up with this list, or are they just sort of your favorites?
I mean, number one, it was just like, what are the ones that come to mind?
Yeah.
I think it was a mix of both nostalgia and memories of many of these films, and then it was the mix of that with a mix of the aesthetics or the story, like the artistic aspect of the film. So kind of a combination of feelings and artistic inspiration, let's say.
Very good. All right, well, let's dive in. Let's talk about your number 12.
Okay, number 12. Here we go. Maybe this will Let's be controversial.
Yes.
So my number 12 is The Black Cauldron.
Uh,
Now, now I will. Uh, I don't think, this is just my opinion, I don't think The Black Cauldron is a great movie. I don't think it's a bad movie. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's a okay movie. I think it's middle of the road. I think the characters are very generic. I think the story is also very generic. Um, uh, that said, I have such an affinity for the movie based on, now this is one based on nostalgia and based on memories, because I was 15 when the movie came out. As a huge Disney fan, number one, it was a new Disney movie, and as you know, back in the 80s and 70s, you had to wait, years between original movies, between new movies. So it was that, and then number two, it was Disney doing fantasy and sword and sorcery, and that made me so excited too. I had read the books in preparation to see the movie, and it also had been teased for years. They talked about Black Cauldron for years because the thing was in production for so long. So I was just so on pins and needles waiting for this movie. When I finally saw it, I loved it. So and even now, I have this kind of knee-jerk response anytime I see something Black Cauldron, even just as like a frame grab or an old piece of merchandise from back then or whatever. I just get so excited because it just reminds me of that time when it came out and how excited I was for it. So that's why I put it on.
I can understand that. I think there's some neat animation. I like the Skeleton King and the way the layers to the ghosts, the skeletons. And I also like the score is really, really good. And it was performed by the Utah Symphony, which is kind of fun.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's right. I forgot that part. Wow.
But I do find Taryn to be a tough protagonist. I struggle. And the Ellen way, they give her absolutely like nothing. She's a princess for no reason, and they give her like nothing to do.
Exactly.
In the movie.
I think at best the characters are they sort of, I'm trying to what the right word for it is, but like they're one-dimensional. They sort of have a function. They are those sort of generic symbols of the boy hero, and
they're archetypal.
That's a perfect word for it. Thank you. Yes, that's it.
I have it very low. I have it at 55, but I can understand. I appreciate your reasons, and I like people that have unique lists.
Right.
I think it's. Oh, go ahead, Rachel. Sorry.
No.
I think it's cool you have it so high, Stephen. And I know in our conversation we talked about some of these films from that time period that you and I both hold in high regard. Like, I love The Black Hole. I just recently rewatched it as part of my Disney 100 watching project this year, and I just love it, even though it's kind of terrible. I just I really like it. I have The Black Hole at 61. It's my least favorite. And honestly, I mean, part of it gets taken down because of Gurgi. I think Gurgi is, I don't know. It just drives me absolutely crazy. That's the name of his character, right?
I think that's what.
And then I think too, it's disappointment, because I feel like this could have been like the coolest movie ever.
Yeah.
And just for whatever reason, if it was just whatever was going on with the studio and just the challenge of the source material and whatnot to try to bring it into the Disney animated movie, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I need to rewatch it again, though, Stephen. Really, and
don't let me influence you, because I don't think everything you said is completely right.
We have said many times that we demand the pre-Katzenberg cut. We want to see it. It's the Snyder cut. We don't need that. We
want the pre-Katzenberg cut.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that every time I watch, I'm like rooting for it to be better than it is. Like maybe this time it's going to be great. Maybe I just was in
Yeah.
the wrong frame of mind all those other times I watched it, and it's just doesn't happen.
But
Well,
it's true. Sorry, it is true
Oh,
what
no,
you were
exactly.
saying. It's true what you were saying about how, like, not to be too like kids today, but they don't realize in the 80s, you were lucky to get one mainstream animated film a year,
Mhm.
maybe two.
Yep.
And and so like I do think there's something to the fact that you valued them more because that was it. Like Oliver and Company was like the only one we got that year. So it was like, okay.
Yeah.
And,
And
now
when
you get
Black
like
Otter,
27.
yeah, and when Black Otter came out, there hadn't been a movie since Fox and the Hound,
Fox and the Hound.
Yep.
81,
so
right?
Yeah.
4 or 5 years in between. That was like, for anybody who's a Disney animation fan, that was like torture.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of the few films for me too that I haven't seen on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
When the summer it came out, I was living abroad and didn't have access to a movie theater, and so that's just one of the things that's made me sad. I wish somehow we could get it on a big screen, but you know, I guess that's maybe at the New Beverly in California, or something like that. Somebody might show
we
up.
did. There was an anniversary screening at the El Capitan out here.
Oh yeah.
I don't know. That was like maybe 10 years ago.
Yes, I vaguely remember that too.
I mean, there is some amazing production values. The layout and the backgrounds are gorgeous in the film. So there are things to really be able to appreciate about it on a big screen for sure.
Yeah, I'd like to go to that.
Yeah, same.
All right, what is your number 11?
Okay, number 11 is The Rescuers. And The Rescuers was the first new Disney animated film I'd ever seen. I was 7 years old, and it was the first new one that I'd ever seen. All the other ones were re-releases. Now, of course, yes, the first time I saw the re-releases, they were new to me, but I'd also seen, you see clips of them on Wonderful World of Disney, and you can see pictures of them in books, and I can read the storybooks and all that kind of stuff. So I could sort of revisit the stories of all the other movies that were being re-released. But Rescuers was the first one that I didn't know anything about before it came out. I remember very clearly seeing it in a drive-in, which is where we saw a lot of our Disney movies when I was a kid.
How fun.
And just eating it up. I just thought it was amazing. Madame Medusa is a fantastic villain. Love the kind of adventure aspect of it. I just, again, another one that kind of, I do think it's a very nice, simple, tight little story with some nice heart to it. But I kind of put it this high because of the sentimental value of it, that nostalgia for it.
Yeah. Well, I was so excited when I saw this on your list because we've been waiting for somebody to agree with Stanford on this movie. All the rankings.
Everybody I talk to, Steven, nobody likes it.
Really?
I love it. I have it at number 9. It's one of my favorites, just for all the reasons that you stated. It's such a sentimental favorite from my childhood, but I also think it's a terrific film. I love the animation style. I love the voice actors.
Yeah.
I love the story. I mean, it's a real nail biter. It's scary because Madame Medusa she's a great villain. She is a mean, horrible person.
Yeah, and to your point, like there's some real moments of stakes in the film, which a lot of times in those 70s movies you didn't get a lot of.
When they're in the cave trying to get the diamond out, that's gnarly. I mean, remember that flood, the rising water always freaked me out, but in a happy way. I mean, it was just like, oh my goodness, what a great movie this is.
Yeah, and Geraldine Page voice performance is just, I mean, to your point, like there's moments it's like chilling the way she scream, the way she's screaming at Penny. Really kind of like for that time period, a return to a real kind of classic Disney villain too, that had some serious bite to her.
Yeah.
I'm so happy for both of you. This is very good. I have this one at 54. I don't like it. I agree that she is extremely evil and awful and like a compelling villain in that sense, but there's just so much of her. I just find myself, she's so shrieky and she's there's just too much of her. And like one of the great things about 101 Dalmatians is that they use Cruella just enough that she's scary and intimidating, but most of the time the puppies are with Jasper and Horace, not with Cruella. So she comes in just enough to be scary. And I don't know, I just feel like, oh my gosh, I can't stand this woman.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah, so that's my take. I also don't think the animation is great. That wouldn't be a deal breaker for me, but yeah, it's that sketchy style, you know. That's not my favorite.
Right. That's not your favorite?
No.
And I love it. I guess because maybe it's childhood, you know, sentimental, but also I think there's I think, I don't know, it just seems like you can see so much of the artist's handwork in it, which I think is really cool, you know. But
I can see that.
I think that's part of it for me too, just loving to see the actual drawing. I mean, I love all the inked cells and the cap stuff later on and all, like it's all, I love it all, but I do kind of have a soft spot. And also maybe because I grew up in that 70s era where that was the house style for quite a few films. So I might just be used to it.
I did meet Eva Gabor once
when
the new I did. When the new movie was coming out, I was
Down Under, Rescuers Down Under.
Yes, I think she passed away pretty soon after that. I'm not sure, but anyway, I was at Disneyland and my cousin was touring the different hotels with her choir, and so we had to go around to Disneyland hotels and then other hotels, and we were at the Beverly Hills Hilton, and my cousin was performing. Eva Gabor gets off the elevator, and I ended up meeting Eva Gabor, shaking hands with Eva Gabor when I was 8 or 9.
Outstanding.
So there you go.
Brushes with fame.
But yeah, so we've done my 55 and my 54. So this
Nice.
And as I mentioned, I have it at number 9, Stephen. It's just an absolute favorite of mine. Love it.
This is very exciting. All right, what is your next one? 10.
So sticking with the kind of sketchy animation style, number 10 is Robin Hood. Also one that I don't feel like is necessarily the strongest from a story standpoint, but to me, the characters are so strong and entertaining. I love the character designs, just the appeal of those characters. The animation of those characters, I think, is some of the strongest that those 9 old men and that team of people ever did. And just the entertainment that comes from those character dynamics. I also remember, so I had never seen Robin Hood until, this must have been 84, I think. That summer on the Disney Channel, they played Alice in Wonderland, Sword in the Stone, and Robin Hood constantly. It was like a summer movie festival, none of which I'd seen. I'd never seen any of those films. And Robin Hood was the one that I kept going back to the most. I videotaped them all, but Robin Hood, I sat like with my face pressed up against the TV screen, frame by framing through the animation because I was so taken by it, and like sketching some of the character, like expressions and poses and like hands that I thought were really appealing, the way they drew particular hands or something. Just really inspired by that film too, just from an artistic standpoint. So that one really has a soft spot for me. Again, I wish it had a little bit, I like that it's a fun, light comedy. I wish there was a little bit more depth to it. I wish it could have a bit more Robin Hood oomph to it. But I still really enjoy it.
Well, Robin Hood is my dad's favorite. And so it's one that we watched a lot. He loved Jungle Book, and Robin Hood are his favorites still to this day. And the only thing as an adult that I guess question about it is that it does take a pretty big swing in the third act. It goes from being literally like pie in the faces and who's driving this flying umbrella to like the jailbreak where everybody is like so sad every town, like,
Yes.
and it's just a big switch tonally from Prince John, the Pony King of England, and so that's the only thing I kind of wonder about it. They could have made that a little smoother, but I still enjoy it. A lot of people complain about the recycled animation. It's the most obvious in that one of any other movie, but I don't really care. Like, I think that animators should be able to use whatever tools they have at their disposal to tell the story. And that's what they needed to do. That's what they needed to do. It doesn't bother me. I have it at 32 though. So I have it like in the middle.
I have it at 27, but I love it. I think I'm with you. It's the character design. And then as I was just, getting older and watching more movies, particularly classic, Hollywood films, I love the voice cast. It's just Andy Devine and all these other
Peter Ustinov.
So Peter Ustinov and Terry Thomas, steal the show. And Phil Harris is so fun because he just kind of plays the same character I think in every movie. But I love it, I just love it. So I think why it's down a little further just because of the story for me. Particularly the third act, as Rachel mentioned, I don't love, but I anthropomorphic animals, particularly the ones that Disney has done, just I love so much.
I'm with you. I love the just that trope of anthropomorphic animals wearing clothes, and just being little stand-ins for humans. I love that.
And it almost has like a sort of Monty Python kind of British humor kind of feel to it, I think, sometimes in the script. It's funny. All right. What is your number 9?
Okay, number 9 is Fantasia. And number 9, it's so quick little anecdote. My first or second year at CalArts, I forget which one, they had a screening at CalArts of Fantasia. And so of course I went and I watched it. And I remember feeling very blasphemous as I walked out of the theater when it was all done, saying to my friends, "Oh, that was kind of boring." And so I admit that I find Fantasia hard to watch in like one sitting. That said, if you chop it all up and take all the different segments on their own, I absolutely love it. And in particular, one of my absolute favorite films that Disney ever made is The Sorcerer's Apprentice. I think that the caliber of filmmaking in Sorcerer's Apprentice is so high, and really is some of the best stuff that Disney Studios ever did. Just the use of color, the use of space, the use of scale as the evolution of scale and color and space as the story gets bigger and bigger and more, Mickey gets more frantic. Like the use of they even go black and white for a moment after he chops up the brooms. Like there's some really cool storytelling stuff in it, and a complete use of the medium of animation, like stuff you couldn't do in live action, even today, I think, with computer animation, because of the very graphic and sometimes very extreme use of color that they use in it. I find it really inspiring to watch. And Night on Bald Mountain is also kind of up there. I think that one I watched too, and I think I cannot believe this was done basically by hand. All these movies were done with people painting and drawing, and putting paper underneath the camera and going click click with a little button. Like it's stunning to me, the level of craftsmanship and artistry that are in the whole film, all the films within Fantasia, but those two in particular, I'm just mesmerized by them when I watch them.
Yeah, I agree. I have it at 5. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And I agree with you about Sorcerer's Apprentice. And that's one of the things I think was a big mistake in Fantasia 2000 to include it in with those shorts, because you're just going to make your new ones look worse. Like so that was a terrible decision, I think, to include it with that group. I actually went to see this when I was very little. And I was always, when I was a little girl, I always wanted to be treated older, like more like an adult. I hated being treated like a kid.
Yeah.
And so going to see something like going to the symphony or to a play with my parents was like really a big deal for me, because I wanted them to like think I was old and to respect me. And so anyway, something like going to see Fantasia, which I knew was kind of a grown-up movie, was very exciting for me. And so I've always had a fondness for it. I know a lot of people think it's boring. I don't think it's boring. I think there's enough sort of variety to the shorts in tone and feel and style to entertain me. But I do agree that if that's a barrier for you, like there's no reason you have to watch the interstitials. Like you can just watch the shorts like at your leisure. There's no reason. So make it work for you. But the animation's outstanding.
Yeah, it's
unbelievable
stuff.
I love Fantasia too. I have it at 19, but I really should say that honestly, and Rachel's heard me say this before, like my top 25 films, they're all kind of like even. I mean, it was so hard to really, rank some of these above another. But I think Fantasia is absolutely brilliant. I also remember seeing it as a kid. I think it was a re-release, and we went as a school field trip for music appreciation. And it blew my mind. It just my little mind who knew nothing. But I just could tell I was watching something special. And to hear that music blasting on the great sound system that was in this movie theater. It was in this great classic movie palace, Steve, it was called the Villa in Salt Lake City. Rachel's familiar with and it's sadly no longer operating, but
it sells rugs now, which
is
so sad.
they didn't tear it down, but it's a rug showroom. So anyway, but still it's fantastic. I have to say, and I maybe shouldn't admit this, as I've watched him as an adult, because I've rewatched it many times, I often fall asleep during the Rite of Spring section. And I don't know if it's just because, I don't love dinosaurs, or just, the music's kind of, it's challenging.
Stanford hates dinosaurs.
Definitely the beginning of that film, that segment kind of dips down in terms of energy. So I can see that
part of it, but still I respect it greatly, and I adore the movie.
yeah.
All right, what's next on your list?
Okay, next would be Peter Pan, and I have the films of the 50s at Disney. I think are really this is an interesting decade for them. Because of course they're coming out of the war, and they're really, bringing back the full animated feature with Cinderella in 1950. And but a friend of my colleague Don Hall and I used to talk about this a lot at Disney. How if you look at the films of the 50s, each one is almost a different genre of story. Cinderella, obviously a fairy tale love story. Alice is a comedy, flat out comedy. Peter Pan is an adventure. Lady and the Tramp is a love story, kind of a romantic comedy love story. And then Sleeping Beauty sort of goes back to the beginning with Cinderella and is another fairy tale, but kind of medieval fairy tale set in medieval times. But they're all very different. And with very different, a lot of them have very different art style as well. Of course, Sleeping Beauty, Lady and the Tramp, Alice is a little bit more stylized than the other ones. It's a really interesting decade. But the first half of that decade, to me, I think I really love those first three films. And so Peter Pan, I mean, another case of character animation that is just, I think, unparalleled. I also have always loved that they made Peter kind of a jerk, that they weren't afraid to kind of keep that aspect of him from the original Barry play. And that very masculine kind of animation. Captain Hook, of course, I think one of the best Disney villains. And Frank Thomas's animation of Captain Hook is just
it's so silly. They would never have such a silly villain now. I don't feel like they all have to be pretty like generational trauma and upsetting, and you can't just have one that's a fop.
Exactly. Yeah. And he and Smee, like all the scenes between he and Smee, I think are just great.
So good.
Again, it all goes, I guess for me, it goes back to those movies that really have those characters front and center, and just the amount of entertainment that they're able to get out of those characters and those character interactions, I think are so Peter Pan I really love for those reasons. And I know there's like cultural things about it that's a little sticky these days, but it's just sort of taking it for what it is. I really love that film.
I have it at 40. I really enjoy the music. I really enjoy the Mary Blair artwork. The second star to the right is an amazing sequence. And I do like the humor. It's very slapsticky, very silly. But I don't really like that they're so mean to Wendy when she's like so nice.
Everybody wants to murder Wendy.
Literally everyone at every and Tink is a lot. She's difficult in that movie, and I guess that's an interesting thing. I don't know. But
I mean, that is another kind of unexpected thing. I get maybe it's unexpected in retrospect, looking back at it now, kind of thinking about how we make movies today, and looking back, going, "Wow, they were not afraid to do that." Like, they created characters, and they stayed true to those characters. They didn't pull back, and they created Tinkerbell to be a little feisty,
jealous,
and a mean girl, and they didn't shy away from it. They didn't try to buff those edges off. I mean, they just did it. And there's something kind of I admire about that.
I think probably my favorite part though is when Smee shaves the bird.
Yes.
He's like, Captain. Oh dear, Captain. That's funny.
And I love when Captain Hook's playing the piano and convincing Tinkerbell to sell out Wendy in the hideout. That sequence is just so great. Again, two characters and Captain Hook has one problem. I gotta find out where his hideout is. And it's just like that simple setup and just how they play off of each other, and the business that they use with the piano, they just found so like every possible moment you could squeeze entertainment out of. They never left that on the table. They always just found that entertainment in the circumstances. They're never just talking heads, and we get a lot of talking heads these days. And
this is one of my all-time favorites. I have it at number 4. I loved it as a child. I love it as an adult, and I agree with you that there are some cultural sensitivity issues with it now. However, I still think it's just an absolutely entertaining, wonderful film. I think what drew me to it more as a kid was just the adventure aspect of it. But I'm with you. I admire so much the storytelling, which I feel like I just felt like the studio was definitely at the top of their game, during that period in the 50s, and there's never a lull for me in Peter Pan. I just think it starts and it never stops, and it's just for me it's pure delight. It's a great film.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, what do you have next?
Okay, next I have another one of those early 50s Disney movies, Alice in Wonderland. Another one which I also completely concede that it is not the strongest story in the Disney canon. That said, when I finally saw it as a kid, I was so entertained by the movie. I laughed out loud. I laughed out loud at a lot of Disney movies. I probably laughed out loud more at Alice than a lot of the other ones. And I really have always loved silliness and nonsense. Maybe also kind of, put in mind of, like you said, Monty Python a little bit ago, Rachel, or like the silliness and just sort of chaos of Looney Tunes. There is something about that always tickles me. And I think there are some amazing moments in Alice that I just find super entertaining. The Queen of Hearts, to me, entertains the daylights out of me. In particular, I love the trial sequence at the end when Alice is on trial. I know it's completely doesn't really mean anything because it is so nonsensical. But again, back to Frank Thomas again too, Frank Thomas villain. Frank Thomas's animation of the Queen of Hearts, I just think is fantastic. Her range, the dynamics of like being super quiet, being super sweet, and then just exploding into this crazy rage. I love that character, and I just found that movie extremely entertaining. So there you go.
Yeah, I have it at 26. I feel like this is the one that varies the most depending on I've done a bunch of different watches of the canon over the years. And I feel like this is the one that seems to swing the most depending on when I watch it. I have to be in the right mood for it, I think, is the thing. It's with the nonsense and the lack of plot. And but the animation is absolutely amazing. I mean, again, Mary Blair, incredible. I mean, I think it's the best you could do with Alice in Wonderland, and it's the best will ever be done with Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. And some of the timing too, like it's really on Disney timing, at least for that period. Like in the Mad Tea Party, some of those shots, the like cutaways to the Mad Hatter or the March Hare, and their little interjections and stuff are so fast, so quick, but and also it's such a showcase for Ward Kimball, who I love Ward Kimball's animation. So it's also just fun to kind of see him unleashed in the future as well.
I have a tradition. Every time I go to Disneyland, I try to listen on audiobook to an audiobook about an animator. And this last one that I did, I listened to a book about Ward Kimball, and it was really interesting to hear about the process of his animation and, particularly movies like this.
Yeah.
Speaking of Disneyland, see, I think the Alice in Wonderland ride at Disneyland is fantastic.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like it's a true representation of the film, and you're really going into it. And so are the other Fantasyland rides, but I feel that in particular Alice in Wonderland really nails it. I always loved the queue where you could see the ride vehicles coming down that windy thing, and then just everything about the ride. I have Alice in Wonderland as a film a little bit lower. I have it in the 40. It's 44, but that's kind of I don't mean to slam it because visually I think it's a real treat. I think for me, I have trouble with how disjointed the story is, but how else could it be done? It's just it's the weirdest thing. But the Disney version I think is so beautifully animated and so colorful. I love the character designs and fun songs. So lots to like.
The weakest part is the walrus and the oysters story, just because it's like it feels, because all of a sudden now we're getting this narrative in this non-narrative story. It feels out of place to me, actually. Totally. And then I think Painting the Roses Red is probably my favorite part, or the unbirthday party. It's fun.
The Mad Tea Party is my fave.
I also love the March of the Cards. Sorry to interrupt.
I do too.
just the kind of just the graphics and the color and just the Mary Blairness of the whole thing.
Yes.
Anyways, yeah.
So what do you have next?
So then rounding out these early 50s movies would be Cinderella. And mentioned Mary Blair. I think a lot of these three films, Cinderella, Alice, and Peter Pan, all kind of in one chunk.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it does have to do with the Mary Blair influence. How much you can really see her fingerprints on the films. Very interesting kind of lighting on all of them, very theatrical lighting. If you look at a lot of the scenes, sometimes the scenes are just almost like almost a black behind the characters, and the characters just pop right off, almost like, they're spotlit. There's a lot of spotlighting in the scenes, which I think is, definitely comes from Mary Blair. Really interesting, just feel to the films. Cinderella, from a visual standpoint, probably of all these three films, as much as I love the visuals of all of them, Cinderella, I think, impresses me the most. The sense of scale in the film, like the big, huge, long staircase that Cinderella has to go up to get to her room up in the attic, the huge windows in the hallway of the chateau, the huge scale of Lady Tremaine's bedroom. Then when you get to the palace for the ball, the scale in the palace is like enormous. It's just amazing. And then a few years ago, when I taught, I was teaching story classes. I took a bunch of frame grabs from the film and turned them all black and white. And the control of value of the darkness and lightness of the film is also absolutely stunning. How they lead your eye, how they direct your eye to where to look based on the scale of value in the layouts and in the paintings. It's really stunning. I find it to be incredibly inspiring, just from a storytelling level. Also just thoroughly entertaining, the movie. I really love that movie.
Yeah, I love it too. I have it at 4.
Mhm.
I love Cinderella. I love the songs. I love the fact that in Cinderella, they take time for her to just sing, and you just
Yes.
with the Sing Sweet Nightingale song, that it's just her with beautiful bubbles, and there's no reason to have that song in the plot. It's not necessary, but I just appreciate, with particularly movies of the past, where they allow the characters to just breathe and us just to spend time with them. Doesn't
I
have to be like
could
a plot.
not agree with you more. Sing Sweet Nightingale, I think, is one of my favorite just moments of Disney animation, just in the history of Disney animation.
Yeah.
It's pure animation. It's and it's one of those great things that animation and just movies in general can do, where they can take something very ordinary and just elevate it to something really magical or really poetic, or just above, at the everyday. And it's just her singing and scrubbing the floor, but wow, it turns it into this amazing little sequence. And I agree with you. I love, we've already talked about some movies that have really loose stories, and some of those spend a little bit too much time on their tangents and their episodes, as opposed to their narrative. But yeah, Sing Sweet Nightingale is just long enough so that you can enjoy this wonderful moment, but you get back to the story very, very quickly, and the story continues to move. And I agree with you. That's one thing. Sorry, a little bit of a pet peeve, not to go off too much on a tangent, but the last couple of years when I was at Disney Features, the outline boards that people were pitching, this is just a personal pet peeve, but the outline boards that people were pitching had like 30 some sequences in them. If you look at some of these early Disney films, they've got 15, 16 sequences. Like, we like to put so much plot into our movies these days and leave very little amount of time for those moments that we're talking, like Sing Sweet Nightingale, those moments of just a little fantasy moment, or a little moment of beauty, or a little moment of poetry, or just a little moment of color, whatever it might be. because we're late for the plot. Like, we got to keep the plot moving.
Yeah.
And I think we can take a lot of lessons from these earlier films, and I think we've forgotten about those little moments of charm and whimsy, and
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about that with the most recent Makoto Shinkai movie with Suzume, and in that movie he does such a good job of giving these moments for the characters. I mean, there's a lot of plot in that movie, but also time where she's literally just talking to a chair for like the whole thing. And I think that that's why his movies are so special and they really stand out.
Yeah. I agree. We need more of those types of movies.
Yeah.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
I have Cinderella number 3.
Yeah.
And I echo everything that you all said. I do appreciate, Stephen, the some of that technical breakdown that you've done of Cinderella, because I think when I often watch it, I know that there's something special about it, but I think I don't necessarily know what it is. And so thank you for helping explain that and helping me understand it better.
Oh yeah.
It's such a visual knockout. I love the story anyway. I mean, in any shape or form, for the most part, Cinderella's story, I think, is just satisfying,
Yeah.
But there's something I just think extra special about this Disney version, and it's the artistry. Again, these wonderful characters. I love the mice, and how they speed it up for their voices and all that. I just could listen to that all the time. I love it. So great.
Yes, and the whole dress transformation sequence is unbelievable.
Well,
it
is. I went and saw that Disney exhibit that was at the Huntington. Did you see that, Stephen? That was I think it was called Inspiring Walt Disney, and it was about how French Baroque art was an influence. It was a bit of a stretch. But
I missed that, but I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It was a beautiful exhibit, though, and it had some amazing art. And I think one of my favorite things I saw, there's a wall, and it had the dress transformation of Cinderella. I think it was clearly copies that they got from the Animation Research Library, but maybe 40 of the drawings. The each individual drawing. And then opposite it, they had the video clip where you could see it, and actually the production of it. But to look at just each one of those things and watch like the trail of sparkles or whatever you call it, from the fairy godmother's wand to getting that dress. I mean, it was a thrill just to see, because it's wonderful to see it in the film, but then to get a real breakdown and just the wonderful artistry of it, it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I'm with you. That's another amazing moment too in that film.
So what you have next?
Next, I have 101 Dalmatians, going from the very traditional animation of Cinderella to the first of the Xerox films. 101 Dalmatians is just as a lover of just story construction and simplicity in story. I find simplicity to be A, really hard to achieve, but B, I find really real beauty and simplicity. So the ones that the films that get a little simpler, I find 101 Dalmatians to be very, very simple in its plot, but again, loads of character. I love that at the time it was contemporary. I love that they did something, a little bit different and shook that up. And I know we talked about the scratchy line already, but I will say I find that to be also, I love that style. And in particular, I think of all of those films, I think I like Dalmatians the most in terms of that look, the background look, the Walt Paragoy stuff, all the Ken Anderson approach to the art direction. Love the characters. Of course, there's Cruella de Vil, who's an amazing villain. I just feel like everything in that movie works. I have trouble finding anything that is out of place or is like, they probably didn't need that moment, or I don't find anything in 101 Dalmatians that I would do differently. Not that that matters what I would do differently, but so I really love.
Yeah, I agree. I have 101 Dalmatians at 6. It's the one of this sketch era. Well, aside from Winnie the Pooh, I also really enjoy the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. But this one, it works because they're dogs with black and white spots. So like the sketchy animation, it works for this. I love Roger and Anita. They're the best. One of the best Disney couples, if not the best. They're great. I think they use just the right amount of Cruella, and then you have Jasper and Horace doing most of the time with the dogs. And I mean, just some amazing sequences, like when they are loading the dogs onto the moving van, and all of a sudden you hear this plop 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 plop, and the suit is coming off, and Krull's looking like, what is happening? All that's an incredible sequence. And I love Sergeant Tibbs. It's one of my favorite parts.
Yes,
so
I love
good.
those three characters.
And just so many cute things, great performances, vocal performances in the movie. And my toes are froze and my nose is froze.
Oh, I know. Those puppies are the cutest things ever. I have this at number 8. It's just,
so
again,
good.
It's a favorite. I'm with you. I think that Pongo and Perdita and Roger and Anita have the best meet cute, I think, of any Disney movie. It's so adorable. And I wanted to ask you, Stephen, about the Walt Paragoy style. I think as a child I didn't understand it, but as an adult I love it. I mean, I just think it's. I mean, I didn't hate it because I love the movie, but I always wondered. You compare it to something like Sleeping Beauty, and of course, we know the history and whatnot, but it's just like a total opposite in style. And what's your take on it, or do you have any other commentary? Go ahead, Rach. Sorry.
No, I think that's why Walt hated it so much, is because it is like, because he was like an animation purist, and so like he lost friendships over this, which is crazy. He really didn't like it.
I think Walt just really liked the polish of the ink, the inked cells, as opposed to seeing that kind of rough, scrumbly kind of line. I from the character standpoint, we talked about it already a little bit. I love it because it's the animator's drawings, like pure animator's drawings.
Yes.
But from the background standpoint, I find that combination of really graphic shapes of color, and then putting a line drawing over that, and suddenly those graphic shapes of color take on volume and take on perspective. I find that really cool. And I guess, again, maybe it's just a personal preference, or I don't know, but I love looking at those backgrounds. Now, by the way, I don't feel like, for me, they don't distract me from the movie when I'm watching it. But whenever I see, still frames from the movie, I just love getting lost in the backgrounds because of that fact. When you can imagine the lines not being there and realize these are just big, graphic, bold shapes of color.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the lines that then give them context. And I just find that really cool.
I do too, and I love just the use of color. I just think that's it's so interesting to look at, and just so beautifully done in such a different way.
Yeah. And there's I'm trying to remember too. I don't feel like they did a lot of. It's all pretty flat in terms of, they didn't do a lot of tones or highlights or any of that stuff that sometimes you would get in some of the more classic feel. So something about the graphics of just color and line and shape, just like paring it down to those simple terms, I find really, again, I just find that really stimulating artistically. Yeah.
All right, what is your number 4?
So staying with the idea of simplicity, the most simple movie I think I've ever seen and is Dumbo, and love it because of its simplicity. It's probably one of their shortest films, I think, or maybe the shortest film. And I love that it doesn't need to be any longer because it's a simple story. You tell the story and then you're out.
Yeah.
A simple cast of, or a small cast of characters. Probably one of the first animated films to kind of introduce that trope that we've seen so many times of the misfit who has some kind of attribute or quality that makes them an outsider, but then ultimately at the end of the day it becomes their greatest strength, and that's the thing which they can then save the day and change the world. Like, that's something so primal, so simple about that, that I find that really inspiring. That movie really inspiring to watch because it is so economical with how it tells its story. Love Timothy the Mouse, one of my favorite Disney characters, and the whole relationship between Timothy and Dumbo I just find so winning. Another thing too is it has antagonism, but it doesn't have a villain, which, as much as I love a great villain, I also love that this film can, it's as long films just need conflict. They don't always have to have a villain, and I love that they can again tell this simple story with characters that act as obstacles to Dumbo and Timothy, but are not necessarily, wouldn't be considered villains.
Yeah, I love this movie too. I have it at 13. I love stories of unlikely friendships, and that's what you get at the core of Dumbo with Timothy Q. Mouse and Dumbo. So cute.
Yeah.
I mean, and Baby Mine, that's got to be in the conversation for one of the great sequences of animation.
You bet. Absolutely.
And the biggest ball fest.
And then I love sequences like the roustabout sequence where, again, the filmmaking in that, just the shots and the angles that they choose, and with the rain coming down, those big foreground ropes coming into camera, like, it's really cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Elephants on Parade.
Yeah. I love pink elephants. Maybe that could be a candidate for one of those moments. It's like, is this a little too long for the story? Because it does go on a bit.
It does go on,
but I kind of love it for what it is.
It's sure interesting, it's a watch, definitely.
You've got to figure that the Heffalumps and Woozles were heavily influenced by the Pink Elephants on Parade. Was that something that influenced you with the Baxen?
Absolutely.
Sequence?
Yeah, we talked about Pink Elephants and Heffalumps and Woozles a lot, just saying, at least I, as a kid, loved those. There was a danger to a soft danger, but as a kid, like, they were a little dangerous, a little bit like, I'm not sure what to make of this. They're they're funny, but there's the tone of the music kind of had a just a little off, like the little minor key in the music, and there's something I really loved about them when I was a kid. So we did talk about, could we do something like that? I don't think ours goes to that,
well, it's
much of a spooky place. But,
it's kind of funny that during that period, Disney, aside from Bambi, loved nothing more than getting their characters drunk. There's almost always
yeah,
scene where characters get drunk.
yeah. Well, times have changed.
Yeah, now they have them eating root beer in Pinocchio. Oh my gosh.
That was such a okay thing back then.
Where do you have Dumbo, Stanford?
Oh, at 13 as well. I love it.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, what's next?
Okay, next, maybe is a little kind of controversial. I don't know. Some people some of my friends disagree with me about this one. But I have The Great Mouse Detective. I love The Great Mouse Detective.
Yeah.
I can watch The Great Mouse Detective over and over and over again and never get sick of it. Again, it's a simple story. I like that it's a caper and a mystery and not necessarily it has heart, but it's not like a big emotional roller coaster. I think that's okay. I love the characters. I love also another one, Stanford, for the voice cast. Unbelievable voice cast.
Yes.
Fantastic personality animation.
Yeah.
Radigan is one of my favorite villains.
Yes.
Again,
Same.
another one kind of like the Queen of Hearts, where he has those dynamics of can be really sour and sweet and oily and then blow up and do these
huge,
explodes. Rage.
Yeah.
Love that. So
and he has one of the first like real villain songs.
Mm-hmm.
You think about
that's true.
Like Maleficent doesn't have a song, Lady Tremaine doesn't have a song. Like most of the classic villains don't have like a song, but he's got, Radigan the world's most
Radigan.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. Great song.
Yeah.
I guess Shere Khan kind of does have one, but most of the classic villains don't have one.
Yeah, you're right. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. It's just one of those movies that I never tire of.
Yeah.
I just absolutely love it.
I love it too. I have it at 15, so pretty high.
Cool.
Yeah, I really love it too. I love the animation. The whole clock tower sequence is amazing. In my family, we were big Sherlock Holmes fans in general.
Mm-hmm.
So we would watch, especially Jeremy Brett series on PBS all the time. My dad would videotape it and we'd watch them. So we were big fans of this. The only thing I don't really like is the burlesque scene. I don't really love.
Rachel, if I may, would you please tell us the story?
Yes. Well, so when I was doing my first canon watch, I was watching this and I was like, what is this scene? I don't remember this scene. And so I called my mom and she was like, yeah, we skipped over that part every day.
I love it.
So I was like, parenting, that's how it's done.
I know, that's how it's done. And then as an adult, you can find out like, oh.
I was like, she's literally stripping in this scene. Like, what is it?
Yeah, it's super weird.
It's weird.
Really weird.
It's like they had this Henry Mancini song, right? They're like, well, I guess we better use it.
But other than that, I really enjoy it. It's scary. I mean, there's some scary sequences in this movie.
Yeah.
With that rat. I'm not rat. Bat.
Fidget. Yeah, the little
Fidget.
bat.
Yeah.
The
Really
bat.
scary. Yeah.
Kind of those pop-up scares that happen with Fidget. I have it at 28, but it's not because I like it. I just think it's such a good movie. And I love
underrated, definitely.
Yeah. I think that the pacing is excellent. I love the character interactions. I mean, I as you were talking about, Stephen, I like how, cute little Olivia, she's very sympathetic, she's so cute. But Basil's just not like treating her with kid gloves. He's just like bossing her.
Yeah. He's kind of a jerk to her for a while.
He's kind of a jerk. And but I think the whole thing works. And as I think, Stephen, you and I had talked about, you had reminded me just of the importance of this film to in the history of Disney animation. Like, because of its success, I think, a lot of stuff would have been very different, right? Had it not been as good a film as it was.
Well, Clements and Musker.
Started Ron and John's career. Their directing career.
Yeah.
Black Cauldron almost killed almost killed animation, and Great Mouse
Yeah.
saved it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right, what's your next?
Next one is Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
Oh, nice.
Two of
Mhm.
my absolute favorite just films in general. I don't even know where to start because I love everything about it so much. I love both films. Probably Sleepy Hollow a slight advantage over Mr. Toad, but it's a very slight. I think what I really love about Sleepy Hollow is just tonally how it plays the fun and the comedy with the all the love story stuff and love triangle stuff. But then, boy, I love the Headless Horseman stuff, and love how they just went for it. And again, the filmmaking in that, the color design, just their use of the camera, the way they move the camera and move the characters in and out of the space. The three-dimensional quality that they put into that chase is just, I just love it. I just love it so much. And it just never gets old. I love that the 40s character design style. I don't know. I just think it's amazing. I love those films.
I have it at 30, but I really do enjoy it. It is my favorite of that package wartime era and the most successful. And they both have really bonkers parts of them. Like the fact that Ichabod is kind of a total womanizing jerk, which is from the story, I think, the original, poem. But I don't think Disney would never have such a. He's basically like Gaston, but in real life. I mean, Brom is the nicer guy. He's the nicer guy, absolutely. Than Ichabod, which I think is funny, and he gets scared off in the end, and Brom I think ends up with the girl. So that's right. And then Ichabod, Mr. Toad. It's just kind of a wild story. I mean, I love the ride in Disneyland. It's one of my favorites. And the fact that he goes to hell on the ride is hilarious.
The ride's a morality tale.
I do really enjoy it. And the animation, especially in Sleepy Hollow, is really good.
Yeah, and maybe Mr. Toad, kind of goes back to what we're talking about before, like Stanford, what you brought up about the just being a sucker for animals and people clothing.
Yes,
those kind of stories. I just read so many of those stories as a kid, and I just love those things. And there's something so charming and funny too, because there actually are humans in it.
Yeah, and that horse as the judge.
So it's funny that it's not exclusively a animal and people world. It's like, oh no, they live amongst us.
Living together. Yeah. The weasels and Mr. Winky and all that, just everything. I'm with you. I have it at the same place as Rachel at number 30, but again, not because it's just it's tremendous. And the as you're talking about, Stephen, that animation in that third act of the Sleepy Hollow portion, that was so chilling as a child, but I loved it.
Totally.
I mean, I really am not a big fan of scary stuff, but that I just could watch all the time because it was thrilling, and it just seemed kind of a bonkers thing for Disney, but I love it. I just I'm with you. I can't get enough of it. And the Mr. Toad sequence I love too. Just for all reasons stated. I think
it's about somebody obsessed with cars.
Well, yeah, that's true. I love cars. Motor car mania is a real deal for me. What about the choices that were made? Like, I think Basil Rathbone as the narrator for the Wind in the Willows portion is brilliant, and I think it's a very interesting choice to have Bing Crosby, but he's fantastic. I mean, he's Bing Crosby,
so good.
And I wondered if that was too much of the time period, but I still think it works great today. What's your opinion? What do you two think about? the narrators on both segments.
I mean, there's something that maybe it's because I'm so used to them. I couldn't imagine them without.
Yeah,
those
I agree.
voices. Like something about Basil Rathbone's kind of the formality or this distinguished quality to him somehow matches with the idea of this eccentric millionaire Toad, and then I don't know, maybe Bing Crosby kind of taps into Rachel, what you were talking about, that kind of the kind of sliminess of Ichabod, something about the coolness of Bing Crosby. I don't know. Somehow they work. I do remember the one thing I remember about that is I remember reading one of Leonard Maltin's books when I was a kid, and he was not a fan of Bing Crosby. He thought Bing Crosby was too casual of a narrator. I always remember that.
Well, I think you get him for the song. That's why.
Yeah.
So you got to.
And by the way, those are some of my favorite songs too in Disney.
Oh yeah.
Disney music history. I know they're not some of the more famously known, but I love the songs.
Oh, they're terrific.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's hear it. What is your number one? Very exciting.
Okay, it brings us to number one, which is Pinocchio.
Pinocchio.
Yay.
All right.
I mean, I think when I think about what Disney animation means to me and all the wonderful memories and warm feelings that I had growing up with Disney animation, Pinocchio always comes to mind. The world of that they created, the village, Geppetto's village, I find so just so charming, and I feel like I'm in it every time I watch the movie, even though I know I'm looking at flat paintings. I feel so immersed in that little village. That multiplane shot at the beginning of the film, or the when we pick up Pinocchio getting ready to go to school, where that just goes through the village seemingly forever, and then landing on Geppetto's workshop. Oh, it's so amazing. And again, another one of those moments where you go, this is just people cranking wheels and pushing buttons and painting on paper. It's handmade, and look at the depth and look at the perspective, and gosh, that's the immersive quality of that. Sorry, I'll stop on that. But I love it. It's so much charm, so much heart. Two main points I'll point out, or I'll bring up. Music to me, Disney music, that is so iconic to me of Disney music. I love Disney music growing up. Of course, When You Wish Upon a Star. But for me personally, one of the most beautiful pieces of music I think I've ever heard in my life is the theme, the Little Wooden Head theme in the score. First of all, I think the Pinocchio score is fantastic. But the theme, the Little Wooden Head theme, I know Geppetto sings a little song, which is charming, but then when it's echoed in the score, it's so beautiful. It's so sweet. It's so heartfelt.
Yeah.
There's a melancholiness to it. It's very rare that I can listen to that without getting a little misty. There's something about that theme that I find so beautiful and so Disney to me. And then the last thing I'll bring up is this is not conscious, but I think because of my love for Pinocchio, and maybe just because of who I am, I realized over the years that one of the most common types of stories that I go back to, or that I create, that I work on, that just come to my mind, are stories about innocents who go out into the world, that a world that's more complex than they realize, that maybe there's more people out there that are jaded. There's a reality that they're faced with, and they have to come to terms with that. That story of that kind of coming of age story, the innocent going out into the big scary world, is a real common theme in the work that I do, and I think it came from a love of this film.
Yeah, I think the music is one of my favorite parts. Even I Diddly Dee and Got No Strings. Yep. And I have it at 25, and I'm kind of like Stanford, where my top 25, even 30 is kind of there's a a 25 car collision for those spots. It's really hard. So many ones I love. And I didn't like this movie as a child. I think that factors in a little bit just because I was a big scare wimp as a kid and I had to grow to and so the donkey scene was so terrifying to me.
Oh yeah.
And little Timmy that is, I don't want to be a donkey. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the trauma. And Lampwick and that whole scene. But I have to say last year, with it being kind of a Pinocchio themed year with the nightmare that was the Zemeckis one and the blessing that was the Del Toro one, it definitely made me, I went back and rewatched this, I revisited it, and it made me appreciate it more after seeing how bad the Zemeckis one was. And so I think I would have it higher on my next ranking. Yeah, but
it's a movie that I respect tremendously. I have it at 22. But and same thing, just like, kind of the top 25 challenge for me.
Yeah.
But I just can't think of a film that has finer animation than it. I am always in absolute awe. I mean, of the whole thing, but particularly those underwater sequences.
Yeah.
How in the world? I'm always wondering how do they do it? How with the hand, everything hand drawn, and as you said, Steve, just the click, right? Just taking a picture of it, and anyway, it's just, to me, it's a marvel. No computer in sight.
Yeah.
All
Yeah, I agree. It's really stunning to me, and it kind of it really sums up everything I love about Disney animation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll add too, because I know maybe people are asking, how comes your whole list doesn't include anything beyond 1985 or 1986? And that's not because I don't love the films that come later. I think there's like a bunch of different Disneys in my brain. And there's the Disney that influenced me and that inspired me. And there's the Disney that when I was actually like working in the industry and then worked at Disney. And so I love all the films that came after Great Mouse Detective, so many of those. But I think when I think about a top 10 or 12 list, I think about the ones that really had an impact on me, and those were the ones that when I was younger, growing up. So that's why my concentration on the Walt era and a bit of the post-Walt era, because those are the ones that I really grew up on, and those are the ones that inspired me to pursue animation. So I don't want to, not throwing any shade on the other on the more contemporary stuff.
Yeah, you don't have any Renaissance films, which is kind of interesting.
No, and I love them all. I love them. But like that's when I was when I was going to Cal Arts, and that's when I was getting the industry, and so it's like it takes on a different meaning. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Those were still inspiring, but kind of in a different way. So yeah.
Well, very good. Thank you so much for doing this. We
Stephen,
really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was so fun.
Thanks for inviting me and for letting me ramble.
Yeah, it was awesome. Well, if people want to follow you, social media or anything like that, how do they do that?
I'm on Instagram and Twitter. Both are Steve Hat Guy, like bowler hat guy, but with Steve instead of bowler. Steve Hat Guy on both Twitter and Instagram.
Very good. Very good. Well, thanks so much. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. You can also follow us at Disney Talking on Twitter. And Stanford, how can people find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Stanford Clark, and I have a movie podcast and blog at moviespastandpresent.com.
Great. And if you enjoy this podcast, please give us a rating and review on iTunes. And also, if you're listening on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We also have our Patreon group and merch store, which is a lot of fun. Take a look at that. And we have #AnimationJunkie shirts at the merch store. Check that out. And thanks again to Stephen, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.